So let me share that screen so you can see what I'm doing. So, yay, I got some hellos. Hey, everyone. So one thing is you should be able to see my screen now. If you don't see it, um, maybe click at the top of the screen. It should say my screen being shared. But yeah, I am sharing content, so you should be able to see my screen already. Awesome. I'm getting some yeses there in the chat. So welcome to week 6. I mean, I guess you were welcomed on Monday, but welcome again to week 6. So today we're going to be working with intro to data visualization. So here I'm just stalling for a little bit so you have the chance to go on your platform on the training website and get there. So it's intro to data visualization. This is how I see it on my end. I'm not 100% sure you see the same thing, but the specific Codio case that we're going to be working on is this one that is going to load in a few seconds. Just give it a little bit of time. So we are doing the one that says intro to data visualization. So these other two you can do at a later time. Yay! I'm also happy to be back. So we are working with this one. So it is the how can we clearly communicate GDP trends using visualizations. So today we are going to be doing visualizations precisely. We are going to be working with Excel. So if you don't have Excel open, this is the time to also open it. I sent the link in the chat in case you just want to click on it. And we have these two Excel files that we're gonna work with. I'm gonna send them again in the chat, but here you have them as well. You can just click here on GDP underscore data and GDP underscore data underscore years, and it would automatically download onto your machine. So you can get it either from the chat or from the guide. So a little bit of housekeeping. Yes, we are going to be working with Excel. We're going to be working with those two files. As always, if you have questions, use the live chat. That's what I'm looking at, so I can answer to your questions throughout the lecture. Also, if you need a little bit of extra help, something is not loading, you're facing a technical issue, you have the hashtag extra help channel where your TAs are also monitoring live. The good news that I have for you guys is that you guys already went through the hardest lectures in Excel, which was the index and match lectures. So today's lecture is going to feel a little bit easier, hopefully. But just to set expectations right, we have a lot of content to cover. So if a question has already been answered, I might not go back and revisit it, just so we can cover all the content and you have the recording with the content, and then you can later on review it as needed. Because if we don't cover the content, that doesn't get recorded, so you can't use it for reference later on. So just setting a little bit of expectations there. If maybe the lecture feels a little bit fast, that's okay. You have your TAs, you have the recording, and you have all the resources. So that's everything on housekeeping. So we can start talking about money because we all like money, right? So today we're going to be talking about money in regards to countries. So GDP. So in case you didn't know what GDP is the gross domestic product. So basically, that's the total value of all the goods and products that are produced by a country. And even though it's not a perfect metric, usually the higher the GDP, the higher the economy of a country is. It's a good indicator of how strong the economy of a country is. So countries at the top, you have the United States, China, Germany, Japan, India. Countries at the bottom, depending on who's taking the data, but usually you would find Afghanistan, South Sudan, Burundi, different places in Africa. So that's GDP, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So the question and the title of this lecture is how can we clearly communicate GDP trends. That's why I spent a few minutes explaining GDP, because to be able to communicate findings related to GDP, you need to know what GDP is. And we're going to be doing that with visualizations. So I am excited about that. So, what are the goals for today? We are gonna learn what are the different types of data that you could have. And based on those types of data, choose the appropriate plot for that data. And also, we are gonna touch upon the skills that you need to present data in a professional manner. So as usual, let's start with our business case. So what are we today? Today, we are data analysts for the Good Economists. So Good Economists is an NGO. So this is something that maybe you can talk to your career coach later, but as a data analyst, you can work anywhere, because everywhere there's a need to understand data. So you can work for the public sector, you can work for the private sector, and you can also work for nonprofits. So today, in our little role play, we're working for this NGO. And this NGO, the purpose of this NGO is to campaign for raising living standards globally. So with limited financial resources, because an NGO doesn't run for profit and doesn't take help from the government. So the financial resources are usually very limited at NGOs, and they don't have a big budget to do outreach and marketing. So if you don't have a big budget, you have to be smart. So they rely on publishing content with compelling stories and excellent visuals to have their voice heard. So your work as a data analyst for this NGO is very important, because this is what it's going to allow them to continue working on this campaign to raise living standards globally. So you, through your data visualizations, are contributing to this. So the exact business problem that we have today is to answer the question, how can we clearly communicate the relationship between GDP and other factors? And then for the analytical context, you will work with these two Excel files. So if you don't have them yet, I'll send them again in the chat. It never hurts. But yeah, now you have them. Yeah, like Drew said in the chat, no pressure. So you really have to do good visuals so this nonprofit doesn't go broke. All right, cool. So let's take a look at that data of those two Excel files. So I'm gonna go on Excel and I'm gonna upload that data. I'm gonna start with the one that says GDP data. So I'm gonna start, so we have these two. I'm gonna start with this one. Here I'm just stalling for a little bit to make sure everyone is in Excel. And also just checking the chat to see if there's questions. All right, seems like we are doing good. So once you're in the Excel platform, as usual, you're gonna upload this first file. So I'm gonna click here this file upload button all the way to the right and search the file wherever you have it in your computer. So in this case, I have it here in downloads. So I'm gonna open it. And there you go. So this is the first file that we're going to be working with. So what do we have in here? It's usually good practice as a data analyst, regardless of the field where you are, regardless of the data that you're working with, spend a few minutes, a couple of minutes looking at your data so you know what you're working with. So one thing that I like to do when I first get a data set, and this is not mandatory, you don't have to do it. I'm just sharing what I usually like to do is that, for example, here you see these numbers. What that means, like hashtag, 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 what that means is that that's a very big number that you can't see in Excel. So I want to fix that so I can see the number. And same thing here, I have this 1.5 E plus 0.8. What is that? This is scientific notation. In this moment, I don't want that. I want to be able to see the actual number. So what am I going to do? I'm gonna click here on the corner, um, all the way to the top right. So I click on this corner and you see that everything got selected, right? So the first thing that I like to do is to hover between two columns, any columns. And once this arrow pointing out appears, I double click on it. So the columns have the same width as the data that they have. So notice that the hashtags here got fixed. They disappeared. And same thing with the scientific numbers. They disappeared because now you're able to see the full number. It was just like a very big number that was getting truncated by the width of the column. But now that has been fixed. So usually I do that. Is it mandatory? No, but it's easier to the eye. And the other thing that I do is that I just select the title and I make it bolded so I know that that's the title. So we have country, we have the continent of said country, the life expectancy. So on average, how many years people in that country they live. So for example, in Afghanistan is very low, 43, where you have, for example, Australia is approximately relatively high, which is 81. Then you have the population. I don't know from what year this data set is. So that's a good question you could ask yourself as a data scientist. Like, is this as a data analyst, data scientist? So is this data set recent? Should I be working with this data set? But in this case, let's assume this is what we actually need to work with. So we don't have to worry about it. And then we have the GDP per capita. So it's not only the gross domestic product, which is the total amount of the values that a country created, is also that number divided per people in the country. So it's a little bit of more of a fair metric because it's basically how much money was produced per person in that country, because it wouldn't be fair to compare a country like China that has a lot of people versus a small country like I don't know, Belgium that has much less people. So to compare apples to apples, it's usually better to look at the GDP per capita, because of course a country like China is going to have a huge number because they have a lot of people. So once you divide it by the population number, it's a fair comparison between countries. So something like Afghanistan is only $974 versus Australia here is $34,000 per person per year. So huge difference. All right, cool. So let's go now on to making it even nicer. So right now it's just plain data, but we can make it into a table. So one thing that you can do is that you can click anywhere in the where you have data. It doesn't matter where, any cell. And I like to do Command A. If you're on Windows, it will be Control A to select all the data. That's the easiest way to do it. You could also just select it manually, but it would be annoying to have to scroll down and select all that data. So the easiest way is just click anywhere, wherever there's data, Control A or Command A, depending on what kind of computer you have. So that selected the data already. And now that that's been selected, let's go to here. So it should say format as a table. So you can just click on it and you can pick whichever one you want. The one that I'm gonna pick is the same one that they used in the guide just for consistency, but it's this one, medium, the blue one in the medium. But you can pick whichever one. This is just the color of the table. And here you click OK. And there you go. If you don't see this button this way, you might have this here. There's this arrow all the way to the left. So I have selected classic ribbon. So if you have single ribbon, it's hidden somewhere in here, like format table as. But if you want to see exactly the same thing that I have, I'm using this classic ribbon here. So then this is just here, this format as a table. So I want to stop for a second and see if people are there, if people were able to get the table. And I'm checking also for questions in the chat. Um, That's a funny comment. So Philip said that Australia is doing pretty good regarding age, given all the dangerous animals that they have in there. So that's funny. Uh, oh, Chris has a really good question. So, what's the currency of this column? Because this column is talking about money. Usually, you should compare apples to apples. So, you would have it in the same currency. In this case, all of it is in dollars. Yes, for example, Afghanistan, they don't use dollars, they use their own currency, but you have to convert that into one currency so you can compare apples to apples. So all these numbers in here are in dollars, but that's an excellent question. Um, I get it too. I also like to sort the data. We'll do that soon. All right, awesome. So um, how did I get the table again? So let me show you real quick. I click anywhere where you have data, and I do Control A or Command the A, and I click on Format as a Table, and I click on this, and then you get the table. The thing that I showed you here, what layout to show, this is not really relevant. It's just more like the buttons that are visible to you. So in case we don't have the same buttons, the one that I'm using is classic ribbon, but it's not too big of a deal. So I saw another good question in the chat. Why would we do this table? So the reason to do this table formatting is that now you can do fun stuff with it. So for example, here on continent, you see that you have a caret now. So you can click on the caret and you can select the continents. So for example, you care only about the Americas because you live in the Americas. So I'm going to click on Americas and apply. So it filter out my data and I'm only now seeing the countries in the Americas. So I can quickly say, okay, look, United States, they have a very big GDP and people usually live on average 78 years versus, and you can also sort your data. So for the person that wanted to sort your data, you can also click here on the caret and say sort by this column, let's say largest to smallest. So the best place to live long in the Americas is Canada, and the worst place is Haiti. So yeah, you can play around. If you want to reset it, just click on here. You can actually click anywhere, but you can, since we used the filter on continent, let's click on continent, and then you can say clear filter, and then it goes back to normal. All right, cool. Yeah, in the guide they have Asia, but you can play around. You can choose Asia, Europe, whichever one you wanna choose. So we have that, and that's for the first table. If you accidentally formatted the whole document as a table, you have a few options. One thing that you could do is click on the table. So this table design menu appears. So you click on the table. Notice that when I click on the table, it appears table design. And you say you have to do two things. One is like switch here to light, so it's not colored, and then convert to range. So that was just to undo all of that. but we do want the table. It's just for the people that accidentally selected these blank columns. And the way to avoid selecting those blank columns is that when you load the data, you click on the data, you do Control A, so it selects just the cells where you have data, and then you do Format, and you select the formatting in here. All right, awesome. So let's go on to the second Excel sheet. So I'm gonna, Excel workbook actually. So I'm gonna go back to Excel, and we had loaded this one. Now I'm gonna load this other Excel file. So let me do that here. So I click on Upload, GDP data years. So the other file, and I open it. All right. So now that you have this, uh, again, same thing. Whenever you open a new workbook, spend a few minutes understanding what is going on. So in this one, similar, it's related to the GDP, but now we have a column that says country, the country code. And this country code makes me think that this Excel sheet would be an excellent candidate for the index match functions. But yeah, that's not today's lecture, so don't worry. So we have the country code, and then the years. So what was the GDP throughout the years for a given country? So in Afghanistan, you can see this one, and you can go all the way to the left and see it throughout the year. So it has data since 1960 until 2019. In this data set, you have to be careful too. That I mean, not careful, but just be mindful when you're working your analysis that you have a lot of blank data. So that data was not collected for some reason. So, for example, in a country like Afghanistan, Afghanistan has existed for a while, but we have some empty data here. So I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe bad. This is a bad data set, like it doesn't have everything. Maybe the country during those years didn't collect the data. It could also be that that happened. You could also have this scenario where, let's see if Kosovo is in this data set. Uh, Oh, we don't have Kosovo. So Kosovo is a country that was created in 2009. So you would only have data since 2009, but it's not even in this data set. So you don't have to worry about it. But just be mindful of these blank spaces when you're presenting your analysis, so you can address them. Either notice that we don't have data for Albania during the first years and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much this data set. And this one should be already formatted for you. Notice that I didn't do anything. This one is already formatted for you. So maybe what I can do with the previous one is that I'm gonna download it, and which is export, share, open. Oh, where do I save the file? This should be more intuitive. Export. No. Interesting. Maybe they don't want me to download this file. Oh yeah, I have auto saved on, so maybe if I go through here, I would be able to do that. Let's see. Download. There you go. So now I have downloaded. So let me send that one that is already formatted, so you have it in the chat. All right, cool. So that's where we are. So you should have been able to open these two Excel files by now. So this is just what you would do as a data analyst, regardless of the task. You open your data and you explore it a little bit. Now let's go into the visualization, because that's the task for today. So we already did this. And now we are going to be talking about data charts and types. Um, so the first thing that you learn today is that to be able to choose what kind of visualization you need to do, you should consider what type of data you're working with. So let me pull up a blank piece of paper so we can talk a little bit about data. So data, each one of the different characteristics that we have about the different countries has a different kind of data. So you could have data. So you have data. And data could be of two types. So data could be numeric and data could be categorical. And as the names says it, one is numbers and the other one is categories. So for example, the countries are categories because you have Afghanistan, Aruba, Australia, etc. So it's not a number, it's a category. And then you have the numerical one, which is, for example, the GDP is a number. But within this, within the numerical world, you also have two kinds. One is discrete and the other one is continuous. So continuous, let's start with discrete data. So discrete data is anything that you can count with your hand in theory. So 1, 2, 3, but not decimal. So 1.5 wouldn't be included in there. So what is an example of discrete data? Let's say you were counting the number of cows a farmer has. So you have a list of farmers and the number of cows that they have. They would definitely have a discrete number because they will have 2 cows, 3 cows, 5 cows. They wouldn't have 5.5 cows. It's not a valid value. They wouldn't have 7.66667 cows. They will have either 7 or 8 cows. So anything that can't take a decimal value and you can count with your hand is discrete, a discrete feature. Then you have continuous values. So for continuous values, the best example I can give you is weight. So weight, someone could be 120 pounds, but someone could also be 120 pounds, 120.2 pounds, 120.3333 pounds. So you can take any value. You can't really count because you could say 120 pounds, 121 pounds, but between 120 and 121, there's an infinite number of numbers in there. So you can't really like count them with your hands. So anything that allows a decimal number will be a continuous variable. And then on the other hand, you have categorical data. And categorical data is nominal and ordinal. So ordinal, the key is in the name, ord, it sounds like order. So is data that is categorical but has an order. So for example, let's see, the degrees. So high school. So what is the level of education of a person? So you could have high school, bachelor's, you could have a master's, you could have a doctorate degree. And even though they're categories, there is an order to them. So someone that has a doctorate degree, it has a higher level of education than someone that has a high school degree. Same thing with, like, for example, t-shirt sizes. So you have small, medium, and large. So those also are also categories, but they have an intrinsic order between them. On the other hand, you have nominal, where it's categories, but the categories don't have an order. So the example I can give you is eye color. So someone could have blue eyes, someone could have green eyes, someone could have brown eyes, someone could have black eyes, etc. And someone that has brown eyes is not superior to someone that has green eyes or vice versa. There's no order. People just have eye colors, but there's no order. So that's nominal data. So those are the four kinds of data that you could have. So each one of the columns will be a kind. And this will allow you to make decisions on what kind of visualization you're going to do. If you have, for example, categorical data, you can't do a scatter plot because a scatter plot is basically you're plotting two numbers against each other. So if you have categorical data, the scatter plot is out of the window. You wouldn't do a scatter plot. So we're gonna be talking about this, but yeah, hopefully this showed you the different kinds of data that you could have. So let's go with our specific data set. So for country, what do you think country is? Is what kind of data it is? Yes. So it is categorical, and out of the categorical options, it is nominal because it could take, it doesn't have any order. Like Puerto Rico is not more than Botswana. Like they're just countries, you know, there's no specific order. So yes, it is nominal. What about continent? Yup, the same. Nominal again for the same reason. What about life expectancy? Yes, so it is numerical because it's a number. And out of the numerical ones is continuous. That being said, I saw someone asking about age, and sometimes you can play around. So age, in theory, we all have continuous age. You're not exactly 50 years old. You're like 50 years old and a few months and a few days old. But it depends how you're treating it. If you want to like compute the information that will be in a database, probably in the database it would just say the whole number. So if you're treating it as a whole number, you could say it's discrete. But in this case, just we have the decimals, so in this case, it's definitely continuous. What about population? Yes, so it is numerical and it is discrete because a country could have 1 million people or 1,000,001 persons, but they wouldn't have 1,000,000.5 people. It's a number. It's a discrete number. And what about GDP per capita? Someone said that on birthdays we are a discrete number. I like that. Okay, so going back to the GDP. GDP, it is continuous. So whenever you see a decimal, that's a giveaway right away that is continuous. So yay, fantastic job, everyone. So you guys mastered these data types. So now that we have the data types, let's talk about the different charts that we're gonna do today. So we are gonna do a table. So out of this table, we're gonna create a different table to display a different kind of information. We're gonna do bar charts, we're gonna do pie charts, scatter plot, and line graphs. So as we go through those, I'll be telling you, okay, maybe you should use a line graph when you have this kind of scenario. So let's start to go one by one. So let's start with the tables. Our goal now is going to be to recreate this table. So if you look at the data here that we have all the countries, all the continents, and all information about it. And our goal is to recreate this table, which is I want to have a smaller table that shows the population, the total population of that continent per continent. So you're gonna add up all the Asian countries and get this number. Add up all the African countries and get this number, and so on. So we're gonna be doing that with something that you maybe know already, which is the pivot table. So let's go with pivot table. I love the excitement for the pivot table. I also get excited about pivot tables. They're so good. I completely unrelated, but I learned Python before I learned Excel. I learned Excel many years later. And there was a function in Python that I never understood until I had to learn Excel and I learned about pivot tables and I was like, oh, so that's what it means. So I have a soft spot in my heart for pivot tables. All right, awesome. So how do we do that pivot table? So the first thing that we have to do is to select our data. So you have different ways to select our data. So the way I do it, as I mentioned earlier, is I click on it and I do Control A or Command A. However, I saw someone in the chat saying that doesn't happen for me. When I do that, it selects the whole table. If that happens to you, it could be that you have clicked somewhere out here. So if I do that, then it selects everything. So make sure you're clicking on the data. So it selects only the data. If it's still selecting everything for whatever reason, maybe you have a different version of Excel, the alternative is to select the columns. So how do you select the columns? Hover over the letter A, and you'll see that there's going to be an arrow pointing down that appears. So you click on column A, don't let go of the click, and continue selecting the columns that you need. So that's also an alternative. You can do it whichever way that you want. It's going to create the same result, but you have those two options. So now that you have selected your data, we're going to insert that pivot table. So a pivot table is basically a table that is summarizing your data one way or another, exactly like the example that we saw about the total population per continent. So we do insert. So all the way up here, click on the insert tab and then click on pivot table. If you don't see something that says pivot table, search for the symbol, which is the same thing. So you click on it. And here it tells you the table range. And you don't have to modify it because we already selected it. It's the easiest way, but you could, in theory, manually write here where your data is, but you don't have to do that. And then you have the two options. You could create that pivot table on a new worksheet, so on a new tab, or in the same worksheet where you're working on. That's completely up to you, completely up to the business question, how you want to present the data. In our case, we want to put it in the same worksheet. So click on existing worksheet. And then for the location, you just got to click whatever you wanted. So I'm just going to click on G4, but it doesn't have to be G4. Just click somewhere where it makes sense. You could also just write it if you don't want to click on it. So we are going to do it here. And we click OK. And you might see this table, this pivot table being empty. That's fine. Don't worry. We are going to modify this table in a minute. But the important thing is that you select your data, you click on insert and pivot table, and then existing worksheet, and you select where to put it. So I'm going to check the chat to see if there's questions, also to give you time to have this. This is okay. We're going to fill this pivot table in 1 second. So let me see the chat. All right. Cool. Awesome. So if you click on pivot table and this menu doesn't pop up, maybe it's popping up on a different screen or like below the web browser. this menu should pop up somewhere. So if you don't see it, try to find it. It's there. It's somewhere there. Um, all right, fantastic. I'm happy that that's working. So how do we put stuff onto this pivot table? It's time for us to put stuff onto this pivot table. So you gotta right click on it. So anywhere, but it has to be on the pivot table. So right click on it and show field list. And at any moment, you can bring this menu out and work with this menu. If you click on the X by accident, that's fine. You can recover it again, same thing. Click anywhere on the pivot table, right click and show field list. Okay, so what do we want out of our pivot table? So let me show you here the example of what we are trying to do. So we want in our rows the continent. So each one of the rows has the different continents. So that tells us that we want to work with continent and we want continent to be in the rows of this pivot table. So I'm just going to select it and see what happens. And it automatically put it in here. But if it didn't automatically put it in here, like if you put it in here, you can just click on it and move it around. And then the next thing that we want is the population. So I'm going to click on population. And Excel is very smart. Most of the time, it's going to figure out what you want. So in this case, it did exactly what I wanted. So you want population. And for the population, you're going to sum all those numbers to come up with the totals. So that's what happened in here. So this was easy because as long as you clicked on continent and population, Excel pretty much did it for you. But just in case, if you were curious, for example, what happens if you move this continent here to the columns? It gives you the same result. It's just quite literally makes the continents the columns, but we want them to be in rows, in the rows. So we just move it here. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that whenever I want to create a pivot table, and maybe this is me being old schooled, but the first thing that I do is that I write kind of like a wish list of how I want my final table to look like. So I just grab a piece of paper and pen and I just draw it out. In this case, it was given to us, so we knew that we needed this, but I draw it out because once I have it draw it out and I look at it, I'm like, oh, I see. So my rows are going to be the continents. So then I bring this here to the rows. And now that I have these values, Excel automatically add them. So it says sum of population, which is what we wanted. But let's say instead of that, we wanted like the average of people per country per continent. So you would click on this here and then value field settings, and it shows you all the different options. So you could count how many countries are there on a given continent. You can do the average, the max, the mean, and all these different things. So we actually wanted the sum, which is the default one. So you don't need to do this, but just so you know in the future, how does it work? So this table, it's almost there. But this one, you might have noticed this blank. This blank is because we selected some rows at the bottom of this table that are empty. So to avoid this from happening, you could select only your data. So if you do the Control A trick, that's gonna do that for you. But if you went the route or where you selected the columns manually, it's gonna have this blank. But that's not a big deal. If you don't have the blank, you don't need to worry about it. But if you have this blank, you can go in here, click on the caret, and it went away. And unselect this blank here and click on apply, and then it's gone. So that's one thing. The next thing is you want to sort, because notice that this one is sorted from largest number to smallest number. So let's sort this one. So let's click on here. Again, I'm clicking here on this caret. And you can say sort by value. If you do ascending and descending, it's just gonna sort the continents per alphabetical order, but you wanna do it by value, these values here. So sort by value. And you select what value you want. In this case, we only have one because we only computed one thing. But if you had computed several things, you could choose which one you want to choose. But in this case, okay, this one. And let's do largest to smallest. And we click OK. And there you go. So now we have the same table. What I'm gonna do next is completely optional, but for most people, it will be very difficult to read this number. So let's insert the commas. So there's different ways, but one way that you can do it is you select these values. You do right click, format cells. Let me just make this bigger. Let me do it again. So you select the numbers, right click, format, click on number because it's a number. And here you have a bunch of options. So for example, if you're talking about money, you could make it a currency so it shows the dollar sign. In this case, it's just a normal because we're counting people. So number. And because we're counting people, we don't really need the decimal places. So I'm going to get rid of them by saying 0. And you click here to use the thousands separator. So this is much easier to read because now I can quickly read this and say, oh, this is 3 billion people, which this number is easier to read, where before I just saw like a soup of numbers. And same thing with the grand total. So number and here, so 6 billion. So we can see that this data is outdated because right now it's 2025. We have approximately 8 billion people in the world. So this data set is probably a few years old, or maybe we have some countries missing. I'm not sure which one it is, but anyway, we have our beautiful pivot table now. So let me check the chat to see questions. If you got only Africa, it could be that here you already had selected only Africa. So let me do it here. And this is the cool thing about the pivot table. Yeah, everyone's, I guess. This is the cool thing about the pivot table, is that this automatically gets updated. I thought it was going to say Africa. I'm not sure why I didn't do that. Let's try Europe. Yeah, but if you're only seeing Africa, okay, this makes more sense. I see why the other one disappeared. But anyway, so it could be that you have that filter in there, so clear the filter, or here you also accidentally here selected just Africa. Let me do this. So it's either here or here that you have that issue. If for the grand total, you have hashtag, 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 is that your column is too small. So let me do it on mine. See, now I have the hashtags. So you just gotta make this column wider and then you would see the number. And all right. I don't think this data is for 2019 because in 2012, I remember we were already in the 7 billion mark and here's 6 billion. So I don't know. But for now, it's just the exercise in Excel, so it's fine. All right, awesome. So it's time for the break. We have a lot of content still, so it's probably gonna be on the shorter side, that break. Yeah, so I'll give it back to Basil now.
Thank you, Viviana. Would you prefer a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break?
Yeah, a 5-minute break would be great.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm gonna release the poll in a bit, so take your time and make sure to answer the poll. Thank you very much. Thank you all. I guess we're gonna hand it over back to you, Viviana. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's continue. So, okay. So you should see my screen now. If you don't see it, maybe it's your Zoom all the way to the top. You have to make sure you're looking at the screen of the presenter, but it should be there. All right, cool. So, let's continue. So we are now working through the different visualizations. We did our first visualization. Maybe you don't consider it as a visualization, that's fair. But it's a way to present data by summarizing, creating a new table by summarizing the table that you already have to display something different. For example, I was reading the comments during the break and I saw someone saying that Asia has a whole digit more than the other continents. And that's a cool insight that we were able to get because of this pivot table, where without the pivot table, it would have been hard to, just by looking at this one, to come up with that insight. So pivot tables are super useful. I would encourage you, in fact, when you are working with pivot tables, don't be scared to play around with things. So just click on different values, put them here, put them in all the different places to see what happens. That's the best way of learning, just getting your hands dirty and don't feel scared. You're not going to break anything. The worst thing that you could do is destroy this file and you can just upload it again to Excel. Of course, in a company, proceed with more caution, but here that we're learning, it's the opportunity to break things. So I would encourage you to do that at home. Okay, so let's go with the next one. So the next one, the next visualization is the column chart. So this one, in fact, is a bar chart. So usually people use the name interchangeably, so it doesn't matter. But to be exact, this one is column chart. And no, not column. No, yes, column. So sorry, dyslexia moment. column, column chart. And this one, if it's oriented this way, like this one is a bar chart. People use the names interchangeably, so it's not a big deal. But column, because it looks, the visualization looks like columns. Think of a building. A building has columns. And this one is the bar chart. But it's the same thing. They both satisfy the same purpose, which is to show how much of something do you have. And the choice between a column chart and a bar chart, a lot of times is just up to you, whatever you like better. Usually when you have a name here on the categories are too long, the name of the categories. In this case, we only have countries, continents, which is fine. But if you had something like if the label was something like the continent of Asia, something like that, it would be hard to put all of that text in here. So you just switch it to the bar chart because you can put the labels here and they're easier to read. That's the main reason why I would decide to go for a bar chart versus the column chart. But overall, it's the same. Also notice that for this, you definitely have to have a numerical variable. The numerical variable could be discrete or continuous, doesn't matter, but you need something that you can count on. So in this case, we're doing with total population. So we are showing the total population of a continent. And then you have a categorical variable, which is what you have in here. You could also, in the bar chart, you have it flipped. Here you have the categorical variable and here you have the numerical variable, but the idea is that you have that combo. So when you have a combo of categorical plus numerical, think right away, maybe this could be a bar chart or a column chart. So let's go on Excel and let's create that bar chart. The first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of blank again because somehow it made its way back. So click here and unselect the blank and apply. There you go. So now that you are here, select the data. So you can select it two ways. This one is a small table that you can just select manually. That's fine. Or my trick, which is Control A. So Control A selects the data. So let's go with this. And now we click on Insert. So wherever you are, click on Insert here. And notice that when you click on Insert, you should be able to see all these different visualizations. So the specific one that we're going to go for is the column chart. So you click on it and you select whatever you want. And notice that Excel separates these two, which in my head they're the same, but Excel separates them. So you have the column chart and the bar chart. So you could do whichever one of the two you want to do. I'm going to stick with the column chart because that's what they did in the guide. But if you want to do the bar chart, you're more than welcome. So I click on it. And when I click on it, it creates this menu or shows me this new menu. So I'm just going to select the first one. And there you go. So now we have created this bar chart over here. A few things to keep in mind is that when you do a visualization, when you select a visualization, Excel does its best job with the information that it has, but it's up to you to make it legible. So for example, here, if I showed this without any context to someone, like if I just open my office right now and I would say like to someone like, hey, you come here, what is this table? They would look at this table and they will have no idea what it is because yeah, maybe we have some continents, but what is this number? So you should make it legible such that someone that hasn't been in class would still be able to know what this is. So to change the title, you can click on the visualization, do right click, and format. Yeah, so again, if this disappears, right click, format. And for me, when I click on format, it just allows me to move it for some reason. I think this is just more like a bug, but that's fine. Just click again, and then it shows it. So in this case, total. So total white. So total population. So here in the chart title, if you don't want that title, you can turn it off here by toggling this button, but you should have a title. That makes sense. So total population per continent. This makes more sense. And then let me zoom out a little bit so you can see a little bit better here. So you have the chart title, you have the legend. The legend is this thing at the bottom that tells you what the colors mean. But in this case, we're not using different colors. We don't need it. So in this case, I would just vote for turning off the legend. But this is completely up to you. That's a decision. You, as the designer of this visualization, you make that choice. Okay, so I turned off the legend. For the horizontal axis, I think it's fine, but you can like open here this menu and see if you wanted to change something, this is where you would change it. Like if you want to change the font of these names, that's where you would do it, but I'm not going to do that now. For the vertical axis, I really don't like how Excel does it. It's a little bit annoying. Because, for example, I don't like here that it shows these numbers. Like, I don't really need to see all these billions. With a 4B would be enough, right? Because then you would know what it is. So in Excel, what you have to do to change the formatting of these numbers is to, here for the category, use a format code. So you don't have to do this now, but just in case you were curious, what is this format code? You could learn the grammar behind this format code. I don't know it because I don't use this often enough where I know it from the top of my head. And whenever I need a specific format, I just Google it and I copy and paste it. So before the lecture, I Googled it. So if I wanted to show millions here, the format code would be hashtag, comma, and then in quotes, million. And if I click outside, then it shows this. I forgot one space. This is slightly better. You could also have it in billions. So let me put this in the chat in case you guys want it. And then for billion, which I think makes more sense in this case, it's hashtag, comma, hashtag 0.0, comma, and then in quotes, B or billion. So nobody's gonna know this by heart. So like, it's okay if you just Google it when you need it. So this one I like because you say, okay, you can tell that the Americas have close to 1 billion. Europe is like 500,000,000. And then you have Asia that is like almost 4 billion. So let me copy this format again. All right, cool. Some other versions of Excel might give you here the option to select the formatting. For me, it doesn't appear. Like maybe custom. Yeah, it doesn't appear. So you just, depending on the Excel version, if you have the same version as me, you just have to use the format code. Yeah, and you can just like continue playing around here with the formatting of this chart. So it's very nice. We won't go into full details today. You can explore this on your own time. But the main takeaway here is that you should make it legible to anyone that has not been exposed to this data. The best test is if that person has not been exposed to this data, to this business case, and they're still able to figure out what is going on, it means that your data is, your visualization is accomplishing the purpose of informing people. And that's very important as a data analyst. It's not enough with just creating visualizations at random, but always think of your audience and see if what you're creating is clear for your audience. So that was on the bar chart. Let me see for the rest. Let's see if we have questions. I see a few questions that have already been answered. If we have time at the end of the lecture, I'll go back to those, but I really want to show you everything that we have in store for today. So let's go with our next visualizations. We did pivot table already, column table, column chart, bar chart. Now let's go with the pie chart. So the pie chart would look something like this. So let's do it in Excel. So the logic is the same. If you were not able to complete the bar chart, that's okay. Now you have a second chance because with the pie chart, the steps are very similar. So if you didn't do the bar chart, don't you worry. Now you have the chance to do the bar chart, the pie chart. So again, we select here with our trick. So we select our data with Control A. Once our data has been selected, you can go up here and click on Insert. And again, here you have a menu of things that you can choose, visualizations that you can choose. So a pie chart is ideal for this case as well, because a pie chart, you need a categorical variable, which is our continent, and a numerical variable, which is our population. This is also a good candidate for a pie chart because we don't have a lot of categories. Remember last time that we were talking about visualizations, if we were going to do a bar chart of this original table, could make sense. It would be a lot of bars, maybe a little bit overwhelming, but you could still distinguish between countries and quickly determine which country is the most populous one. But if you do a pie chart with all the countries in here, all these slices will be so tiny that it will be very hard to process any information. So a pie chart for this one wouldn't be ideal, but a pie chart for this one works. So that's what we're doing. So again, I selected all my data. I clicked on insert, and here I have my pie chart. So I click on it, and you have two options. You have the 2D pie, and you have the donut option. So we're gonna go with this one, the 2D pie, but feel free to explore with the other ones after the lecture. If I were you, I would click through all the buttons to see what do they do, each one of them. But in this case, again, pie and pie chart. And we have our pie chart. So that was fairly easy. But same thing as with the previous one. You need to format it so it makes a little bit more sense. So you can right click on it, click on format, and this menu should appear. So again, you can change the chart title. So for the chart title, maybe you could say percentage. Let me turn this off. Percentage of percentage population, let's say continent population in percentage, or whatever makes this visualization clear. So that's here in chart title. In this case, notice that we need the legend. I'm gonna briefly turn the legend off so you see what happens. If I turn off the legend, I don't know what these slices mean. So you should keep the legend on. And then, so I have it on, and then you can choose where you want to have it, on the right, at the bottom, at the left, wherever you think it makes more sense. For me, I like it at the bottom, so I'm just gonna keep it at the bottom, but you can do whatever you want. And then for series, series is the one, with series is the one regarding the numbers themselves. So that's what series mean. So here is where you would add the percentages to these slices. So again, series, data labels. So I'm gonna click on the data labels, and it shows the numbers, which is fine if you want to show the total population numbers. I don't like it. In my personal opinion, I don't like it because I think it's very overwhelming to see these big numbers in a pie chart. So I prefer to, instead of showing the value, I prefer to show the percentage. So I'm going to click here on percentage and unclick the value. So now I see the percentage. I like this better. And maybe you want the category name. So you see directly here. So now that you have this in here, maybe you could get rid of the legend. You don't need the legend anymore. Up to you if you want to keep the legend or not. That's how I like it. Maybe you like it differently, so feel free to do it however you want. How do I choose different colors for the legends? Actually, I don't know. I would think there would be an easier way, but when I try to change the color here, it changes. Oh, well, no, not for the legends. Let me undo this. When I change it here for the series, I want to vary the colors per slice. And then I would like to choose each one of the slices, but then when I click on a different color, it makes everything the same color. So I don't know. And that's fine because Excel is not the main purpose of Excel is not visualization. So when you want to do a quick visualization, Excel is the tool. But when you want to have more control over the placement of the text, the colors, the way you're showing information, a better tool would be Tableau or Power BI or Looker Studio, which we'll look later. We'll learn in upcoming lectures. But if anybody knows how to change each one of these slices, feel free to share it in the chat. But yeah, that one, I don't know. Okay. So let me see the questions in the chat. Um, yeah, let's see. For example, another good point is Isamar said in the chat, oh, I don't like how Oceania is just like a little bit white and you can't really see it because it's very, very small. I think if I make it super big, you will be able to see it. I don't know if you can see it there. It's very, very, very small. But for example, I'd like to have more control over that. And in Excel is very hard, where if you were working on Tableau, it would be easier to modify this pie chart. So right click, I was doing right click for the color. Let's see. Oh, Frank is this tip is sponsored by Frank. So right click on this slice and change the color here to whatever color you want. So let's make it this color. But for me, it changes everything. That's what I was doing earlier. I don't know. Maybe my Excel version doesn't support that option to change only each one of the slices. But thank you, Frank, for the suggestion. Let's see. Oh, I see that people are able to change the color. Huh, interesting. My Excel is not allowing me to do that. Ah, there you go. There you go. I know what is happening. So you have to click on the slices, but notice that here all the slices are selected. Just click on again on the one that you want to change and you select the color. And there you go. So now you can change the color of the slices. See, you guys have now been beaten the master. You guys know more than me now. All right, awesome. So, all right, cool. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So that was the pie chart. And again, keep in mind to whenever you work on a visualization, to make it meaningful and understandable. I should be able to open my office right now and say, "Hey, you, come here, read this chart. Tell me what it is, what it is," and they will be able to tell me what it is. Okay, so time for an exercise. So the exercise is this, and the question is the following one. Explain what are the advantages and disadvantages of each one of the three approaches that we just went over. There's no right or wrong answer. Whatever you feel like it's an advantage or a disadvantage, feel free to share it in the chat with us. So I'll give you 2 minutes to think about that, and then we will go through some of the answers.
2 minutes left. 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up.
All right. So thank you for those answers. So here's how I would answer that question. So the tables are very useful when you want the number, the exact number down to the last digit. So for example, if my boss told me, hey, I want to know exactly how many people we have on each continent because I'm going to send every person $1. I need this visualization because I need to tell my boss exactly how many people there are so my boss knows how many dollars he needs to send away. I don't know why he would do that, but okay. But yeah, if it's something where the exact number matters, the table is the best one. Then for the bar is the best visualization to compare different categories. So for example, from this one, you can quickly say, oh, Africa and America have the approximately the same amount of people. And then Asia has disproportionately more people than all the other countries. And then Oceania makes sense because there's only 2 countries in Oceania, Australia and New Zealand. So it makes sense that it's very, very small. And then the pie chart, in my opinion, is the best visualization to use whenever you want to show how does it relate to the total population. So for example, from this pie chart, I can quickly say that more than half of the world is Asian. So I see here that it's like more than half of the pie chart. So if you want to compare it to the total, the pie chart is better. And then for the 3 visualizations, notice that we were working with the combo of one variable that was categorical and one variable that was numerical. So we had those 2 variables and we were able to visualize it 3 different ways. And the 3 different visualizations address 3 different business questions, 3 different uses in a business. So it depends on what is your end goal. You would choose one over the other one. All right, cool. So let's go with the next one. The last thing of the answer is that, for example, if you wanted to show to emphasize the fact that Asia is more than half of the world, you could collect all these other slices into a group and call it others to drive your point even further home. So in this, you are highlighting Asia because it's the only one with a proper label. The other one is rest of the world. So you can quickly see, oh wow, Asia is more than half of the world. So if you want to drive the point home even more, this is an alternative. You could do the pie chart this way. All right, so now let's go on to our next type of chart, which is the pie, no, the pie chart. I love pie, so I was thinking of pie charts, but the next one is scatter plots. So for scatter plots, you absolutely have to have 2 numerical variables. Why? Because the scatter plot works the following ways. Assume you had something like 2 variables, let's say 2 numerical variables. So let's say height and weight. And then here you have someone that is 6'5" and their weight is 200 pounds. And here you have someone that is 5'9" and 120 pounds, for example. So you take each variable. So let's say this one is going to be my height and this one is going to be my weight. And then you just plot it. So you say, okay, height 6'5" is going to be here. And then weight 200 is going to be here. So you just plot it. And you go on to the next one. Let's say 5'9" is here approximately. 120 is here approximately. So you plot it. And then you plot all those values that you have in your data set. But that's why you need it to be numeric. Because if it's not numeric, if it's a category, it will be hard. You wouldn't be able to place those numbers. One question that you might have is, could I use 3 columns? Could I use here like age? And here you have something like 15 and 20 or whatever. You could, and you could do a 3D scatter plot, which is very hard for me to draw right now. In Excel, it would also be a little bit hard. In Python, in something like Python, you can create a 3D plot and it's interactive, so you can rotate it and see it, and it's really nice. More features. Could you use more features? Not really, because as humans, we only see in 3 dimensions, so we're limited by our inability to see higher dimensions. So 3 is the top. And now that I'm speaking of scatter plots, so we have said, okay, we know that scatter plots need 2 numerical variables, but scatter plots are also very good to show the correlation between 2 variables. So what is correlation? Well, I just said it. So correlation is the relationship between 2 variables. So correlation is just a number that you can compute. So if you have 2 columns and those 2 columns are numerical, you can compute that number. So that number is going to be from -1 to 1. It's always going to be within that range. And that number, as simple as it is going to tell you a lot. So for example, if the number is 1 or close to 1, your scatter plot is going to have the following shape. And what this means is that you have a positive correlation. And what does that mean? That as one variable increases, the other one also increases. So for example, height and weight. As someone is taller, the heavier they're going to be. The correlation for height and weight is not going to be a perfect one, because there are other factors that influence weight, such as diet, age, gender, amount of exercise. So it's not going to be a perfect one, but it's going to be something close to 1. It could be something like 0.7. If the number is close to, let's keep the 0 for now. If the number is close to -1, it's -1 or close to -1. Your scatter plot is going to look the following way. So you have this downwards trajectory. And that means that those values, those 2 variables, have a negative correlation. So what is a good example of a negative correlation? So the more hours you spend on TikTok, the less of a grade you're going to get on your final exam, for example, because the more you're watching TikTok or playing video games, your grade is going to go down. So as one variable goes up, the other one goes down. And then if it's close to 0, so 0 or close to 0, so for example, I don't know, 0.002 or something like that, the scatter plot is going to look like this. So it's like all over the place. There's no really like a shape. And this means that there's no correlation between the 2 variables. So for example, shoe size. So we all in here have different shoe sizes. I'm a 9, but some people might be a 10, 11, 8.5, 6.5, whatever you are. That's not going to be correlated to how smart you are. So your IQ is going to be different for different people. So you could have really smart people that have different shoe sizes, and you could have not so bright people with different shoe sizes. There's no correlation in there. So there's no relationship between those 2 variables. So that's correlation. Now you know why this program is correlation 1, because it's a positive correlation. So hopefully the more you're with us, the more you learn. So that's correlation 1. Which is a positive correlation. That being said, correlation doesn't explain causation. Just because there is a good relationship between 2 variables doesn't mean that one explains the other one. And the best example that I have for that is, oh, this is a little bit blurry, but is the correlation between the number of people that have died in the US by drowning into their swimming pools, and the number of movies that Nicolas Cage has been in. So, by pure luck, those two numbers are highly correlated, and the correlation is very close to one. But if I call Nicolas Cage right now and I'm like, hey, bro, can you stop being in movies? I'm sure people are going to still drown in pools. Like, it's not related. And this one is very obvious that it's not related because it's absurd. But sometimes it's a little bit unclear, and you got to do more exploration to know why two things might be correlated to each other, if there's a relationship there or not necessarily. So, correlation doesn't imply causation. But yeah, that's why scatter plots are super, super useful. Yeah, I like that one. Correlation one is a good relationship between learners and teachers. I love that one. Let's see, what else do we have? Weight versus mile per gallon. Oh, I love that one. Thank you so much for that example. I always struggle thinking of examples with negative correlation. So the heavier a car is, the less efficient it's going to be with fuel, with miles per gallon. I'm going to steal that one for future reference. Thank you so much. Let's see. What else? Conspiracy theory, Nicolas Cage is drowning people. Maybe. Oh, Nicolas Cage. But yeah, okay. So now that we have talked about scatter plots, let's look at our data. And in our data set, we have several numerical variables. So we have life expectancy, population, and GDP per capita. So you could do scatter plot with any combination of those two. In this case, since our main focus is GDP, so let's choose GDP as one of them. And we could look at population and life expectancy. I'd be more curious about GDP and life expectancy. So is there a correlation between the richer a country it is and the life expectancy of their people? So there's actually a plot for that, which is this plot. So notice GDP and life expectancy. So from what I just told you, does this have a negative correlation, a positive correlation, or it seems like it doesn't have a correlation? And if you're feeling venturous, try to guess the number. What is the number of that correlation? And remember that correlation can only be between -1 and 1. So just make the guess. All right, so it is positive. I love it. I love it. Numbers, nobody's close to the number. But I like that people are writing 1. I'm going to tell you why it's not 1, but it is positive. So yay. So it is positive because you have this like upwards trajectory. It is not 1 because to have a 1 correlation, that's a perfect correlation. So that would be, for example, someone's age and the year. So here you have the years. So 2001, 2002, 2003, and a specific person's age. So maybe they're 50, 51, 52. So in 2001, they were 50. The next year, they're definitely going to be 51. And the next year, they're definitely going to be 52. And you plot this like this. So if it falls exactly on a line that is diagonal, so you have as one increases, the other one increases exactly the same amount, that will be a perfect correlation on 1. If you don't have that, if you have a plot that looks more like this, that is like close to the line, but not quite on the line, that would be very close to 1. So if I had to take a guess of this one, I would say like 0.9. But this one is not that close to the line. So it is positive. You're right. There's a positive correlation. As GDP increases, life expectancy seems to increase. But because you have this weird shape here, I would say this correlation is probably closer to, my guess is going to be like 0.7. I'm not sure, but I think it's 0.7. So how do you know? So the way to compute correlation, it looks a little bit scary. Let me show you the formula. Correlation formula. So the formula looks scary. If you plug in the values, it's actually not scary, but we have the power of Excel with us. So let's just compute it in Excel. So in Excel, it's a formula. So equals correlation. And you select the first column, comma, the second column. And let's have that drum roll. What is going to be the correlation? Am I right? Am I wrong? So I said that it was 0.7 and the actual value is 0.68. So I was not that off, but yeah. So next time you can just use this function, the correlation function, and you can get that value. And you can also just look at it. So it is nice. Let me copy and paste this formula in the chat in case you want it. So a few things that are super cool. I can't paste this formula in the chat. Okay, I pasted it in the chat. But yeah, if a few nice things is that notice that by just looking at this, I was able to estimate the correlation. And the other way around, by looking at this number, I know that I don't have this perfect diagonal, that I just have like a upward trend, but it's a little bit all over the place. So pretty cool stuff. Okay, but we're here for the plots. Enough math. Let's go for the plot. So how can we make this plot? So one thing in Excel is that we want in our x-axis the GDP per capita. So in Excel, and the y-axis is going to be the life expectancy. So in Excel, to be able to have something in a scatter plot that is in the x-axis, it needs to be to the left, and the y-axis needs to be to the right, column-wise. So in this case, it wouldn't work because I have this to the right, which is my x-axis, to the right of this, which is going to be my y-axis. So I need to move my y-axis to the right. How do I do that? You have several options. My favorite option is clicking here on the C. And notice, I don't know if you can see, there's like 6 dots in there. And you can use those 6 dots to put your mouse in there. So notice that when you see those 6 dots and you put your mouse in there, you get the little hand. So the little hand is going to allow you to quite literally grab the column and move it to wherever you want. So when you see the little hand, click on it, don't let go of the click, and move it wherever you want. In this case, we want to move it to the right of GDP. So there you go. It was as easy as that. People are not seeing the 6 dots, so let me do it a different way. A different way that you could do it is select the column by clicking on C. If you don't see the 6 dots, see if you get the hand. If you don't get the hand, oh well, then we have to do right click, copy or cut. So I'm gonna do copy. And then here on the F column, you do paste. So yeah, you have the column twice, but that's fine. You just need the value to the right of this one. Or yeah, like if you do cut, then, and you paste it here, then, well, it creates this blank column. So you can do it whichever way. I would still give it a try to this option. I feel like it's the easier one. And maybe you just have to hover over it and it would appear. So I'm not sure if it's like a user problem or a program problem. So yeah, but you have those two options. All right, so now that you have it, let's select these 2 columns. So I selected these 2 columns, which is what we need. And we're going to do insert very similar to what we have been doing with bar chart and plot and pie chart. So we click on insert and we want our friend the scatter plot. So click on scatter and select this first one. And there you go. So now we have our nice scatter plot. So we have it here. And as with the previous examples, you can right click on this plot, format, and play around with the formatting. So make the title a little bit more readable. You can play around with the units as well. It's always good practice to put the units, because here I don't know what this is. Is this by looking at the number, I know that this is GDP per capita, and this one is the age, because people don't live past 100 years, so that's why this goes from 0 to 90. But it will be, for someone that has not been familiarized with this data set, it will be good to put those legends in there. I like that question, Chris. So Chris asked, what if I do it the other way? So if you compute the correlation between not the life expectancy and the GDP, but flipped. So let's look at it with a number. So if you use the same formula, but you just flipped the columns, you still get the same number. So it doesn't matter which orientation you choose. So if you put the H on the x-axis and the H on the x-axis and the GDP per capita on the y-axis, it's still going to be a positive correlation. So the same number. The graph is different. The graph is flipped, but notice that you still have, I'm not going to do it, but I can draw it here. You still have like this upwards behavior. So I would have still have said, oh, that's a positive correlation. And that's why you get the same number versus this one, that this one is kind of like this. But I like that question. That's the type of question you need to be asking. All right, awesome. So let's go to our question. So we have a question coming up. So why is a scatter plot appropriate for this type of visualization? So I already kind of gave you the answer, but you still have a minute to come up with your own conclusions. All right, I love those answers in the chat. So it gives me a visual representation of the correlation. I can see what is the relationship between the two variables, whether it's positive, negative, if there's nothing in there at all. Yeah, so good answers, everyone. So in Excel, you can actually visualize it per country. No, per country, no, per continent. I'm going to skip this section because we only have 10 minutes left and I want to cover line charts, but you have this in your Codio guide, so you can do the exercise. And as you're doing the exercise, if you have any issues, you can reach out to your TA. So let's look at the GDP trends over time. I love the question that Danielle asked in the chat because she said, couldn't this be a line chart? So this is not a great candidate for a line chart because let me find the pretty one, which is the one from the guide. You could do it a line chart. Excel would do it for you, but it wouldn't be ideal because if you have this visualization, what is a line chart gonna do? A line chart is gonna put a line between these points. So basically it would try to connect everyone and you would end up with a crazy line chart looking like this. So this is not a great visualization for a line chart for that reason, but I love the question because it makes you think, when should I use a line chart versus when not? Why is there here not a good scenario? Because these different dots, what do they represent? This dot represents a country. I don't know what country it is, but that's a country. And this country has a specific GDP and a specific life expectancy. And here's another country. But between this country and this country, there's no relationship. Like they just are countries that have some values. So this is not an ideal data for a line chart. A line chart is better typically when you have a time component. So for example, here, let me show you, which is the how much GDP has increased over time. So if you did a scatter plot here, it would still work because you will have the value from 1960, from 1970, from 1980, 1990, you have this scatter plot, right? But there is a connection because the population from the year 2000 to the year 2001 has a relationship and it was increasing. Maybe you don't have the granularity of what was the population every single day of the year, but you can safely connect the 2 points. So when you can make this connection like this, that's when you should use a line chart. The biggest giveaway is that you have a variable that is a date variable with a numerical variable. So that's when you would use a line chart. So let's see how to do that line chart together. So to be able to do the line chart, we actually need the other Excel file. So if you don't have it, let me put it in the chat. So I just put it in the chat. So now we're gonna work with the other Excel file. So in case you haven't uploaded, you just upload it. It's the one that is GDP data years, the one that has the years. And that's why this is the good one for the line chart, because it has the years. So we already pre-processed the data a little bit for you, so it's easier for you to create the line chart. So go on the line chart tab here to the bottom. So not all data, line chart. So you have fewer data that you can work with. So in here, same thing. I like to click here all the way to the corner and then between 2 columns, double click. So you can see all the numbers. But if you're still getting this notation, this is scientific notation, and you want to see the actual number, you can select everything. So Control A, I selected everything. And then right click, format, and you change the number. And there you go. And 1,000 separators since we're here. You don't have to do that. That's just, it's easier for visualization. So let's start with the line chart. So the line chart is same thing as always. So you select the data that you want to work with. So here we have created for you the amount of the GDP per year overall. So select these 2 rows. How do you select these 2 rows? You select these 2 rows by clicking on them. So you have selected them. And same thing as before, insert. And then you click on line. And this 2D line. So There you go. So now we got the GDP per over time. And as with the previous tables, the previous visualizations, you can go on right click, format, and then play around with the title and the numbers to make it more readable. Then you could also have multiple line charts per visualization. So instead of having like an overall one, let's say you wanted to see the line charts in the same plot of Brazil, China, India, Japan, and United States. So how do you do that one? So that one is a little bit more complicated. We only have a few minutes left together, so I'm gonna do it a little bit fast so it gets in the recording and you can watch it later at home on how to replicate that table. So you select all the columns, then you click on insert, and you might be tempted to do line chart, but that's just gonna create a crazy visualization. So the way to correctly have several line charts on the same visualization is by actually selecting scatter plot. So we select the scatter plot, and we have this crazy visualization here. But once you're in here, you have to click on switch row column. And now this looks more like a line chart. We just need to connect the different points so we can have a line chart. So once you have it in this state, you click on line again. So you select the chart. While the chart is selected, you have to click on line and you select the line visualization. And there you go. Did it seem like it was too many steps? It was. If you were working with a software that was the goal of the software is to create visualizations, it will be a little bit easier. So once we work with Tableau, Power BI, Looker Studio, it's going to be a little bit easier. But now you know how to create several lines on the same line chart in Excel. One main thing related to line charts, typically you will have here a time variable on the x-axis, a numerical variable on the y-axis, and my suggestion is to keep it simple, so don't have more than 5 lines per chart, because then it will get really hard to understand what's going on. So if you were going to do it with this data set that has all 200 countries of the world, it would look very overwhelming. There will be 200 lines. So just select a few countries that you're interested in, like in this case, and you do this. Okay, cool. So I know the part of the line charts was a little bit fast, but I wanted to make sure that it was in the recording so you can watch the recording later on. And of course, as usual, you can reach out to your TAs if you find any roadblocks as you go on this. And okay, cool. So let's go with the conclusions for today and the takeaways. So GDP, something to keep in mind, GDP is a metric that is a little bit not super objective because it counts all the valuable stuff of a country, which usually is goods and service. But some people argue, what about caregiving activities? What about activities that don't necessarily produce money, but that are very important for society? Like, for example, raising a family that doesn't produce money, but it's important for society. So GDP is a little bit controversial from that perspective. However, it's cool to see that there is a correlation between GDP and life expectancy. Doesn't necessarily mean causation. So just because people are richer doesn't mean that they live longer, but there is a correlation there. Not necessarily causation, but there is a correlation there. Takeaways for today: choose the correct way to visualize data. Make the story easy to understand by being careful with the presentation of the details. So make sure you have a good title for your axis, you pick the right colors, the numbers are in a nice format so people are able to understand what you're doing. We learned bar charts, We learned scatter plots, line charts, tables, and pie charts, and the different use cases of them. And I'm excited for what we have upcoming next. We have one last Excel lecture on statistics, and then we're going to start with the visualization aspect of it. So we have really cool stuff coming up with Tableau and Looker Studio. So thank you so much, everyone, for being great. All the comments, I was happy reading all the comments. And I'm going to give it back to Basil now.